Hi, and welcome to Novel Solutions for Novel Times from Retail Blockchain Consortium. So today we're going to talk about resilience in the supply chain, and we're going to keep this very short and just give a few of our opinions and just a quick discussion around this, and then how, to think about this for your supply chains in the future. So first of all, I'll hand you over to Naj, who is going to sort of open up the topic for us.
Hi guys, it's Naj here again. Glad to be back again to talk about supply chain and the resilience. It's a big piece, and as Antony's saying, we're going to give you a couple of thoughts in terms of our experiences, and hopefully from that we can engage in a bigger conversation beyond just the means of this webinar and podcast. For me, the challenge, I think for years, I've primarily been in the healthcare space, and we've had many conversations with some of my peers and leaders within the businesses that I've operated in around resilience. And I think we felt that though we were beginning to become more efficient and seeing these efficiencies transpire in terms of the prices that we're charging for our product, the end product, there was a price that we were beginning to pay, and we were realizing this as we were going along. For us, we would talk, and I certainly would talk about resilience being in the region of 7, 8, maybe 2, 3 months maximum. Brexit may have baked in a little bit extra. The truth of it is that as and when the viral pandemic came to hit us, the supply chain, certainly within healthcare, became very exposed very quickly, far more rapidly than many of us even could have imagined. In some instances, critical drugs were becoming very short supply within a week or two. Some cases we're days away from potentially drugs that were required for intubation. So for me, the question that we need to be asking is, what can we do now as we move forward? I mean, the challenges are there. I'm sure that the guys on the panel will probably talk to some of the other things that they've experienced. But we're now a position, a moment in time where we can actually start to reflect and think what we can do to kind of be better prepared for this. How do we build in and bake in greater resilience? What technologies do we need to look at to explore? What behaviors, we'll talk about that another time, I guess, do we need to do to make sure that we don't end up in the same position again? So yeah, I hope that sort of positions it, Antony.
Yeah, great, thank you, Naj. So is one of the things you just said then, is automation going to be part of the key to this? Is automation the next sort of savior for the resilience of the supply chains, and what sort of automation should help?
I think automation will definitely will have a part to play, but I do think that we need to get better at being able to predict where the challenges are going to be. So we need to be able to plan better. We need to be able to kind of do simulations, Monte Carlo type simulations, where we're kind of laying out the risks. And I'll let others talk about risk because they're better positioned and more learned in that regard than me.
Before, Naj? So were we planning for risks like this before? And if not, why not?
Well, I think sometimes, and without picking on any particular countries, I think some countries have done scenario planning, and for whatever reasons have ignored some of those situations. I know that stuff in the UK has been coming out around simulations that were done. I don't know the details of all of those sort of simulations, but suffice to say that I think it was done for whatever reasons that they were ignored, and it was felt that we could just fall back and the system would somehow resolve itself. That clearly hasn't happened.
And Paolo, from a more economic standpoint, economic risk and systemic risk, is that part of the reason why the supply chain resilience has sort of been tested here?
Yeah, I think that the problem here is basically the fact that we don't have enough data, and in geopolitics you distinguish between 4 types of risks that are the known unknowns, the knowns unknowns, specifically what is this type of COVID crisis about unknown unknowns. And basically you cannot predict what you cannot expect, and you cannot expect it in terms of likelihood, in terms also of impact. So if you don't, it's like a black swan. If you don't have basically a type of, you don't have enough data, and you don't have enough,
forecasting
sources from where you can drive your analysis, then you cannot really be reliable in any type of scenario analysis that you may want to do. So the difficulty is in this specific context is exactly that we are in a what we call a black swan type of event that no one did expect. And
Paolo, question on that. So I was reading, which I very rarely do, but I did read every so often, and I was reading that this is not actually a black swan. Black swan events, the actual definition is they come out of nowhere and they hit you and they're pretty shocking and nobody ever expected them. This is not a black swan event. Everybody knew pandemics were going to happen. We've known for years, like hundreds of years, that they were going to happen. And a black swan event doesn't happen that often, but the crisis in 2008, the 1990s, etc. It seems every 10 years we have a black swan event. So to me, is that fair to say that this is a shocking black swan, totally different to the others? Now, I know it is in makeup, but it's still, the effect is the same. We don't have any resilience. We're not building up resilience.
Yeah, the point of the black swan is basically the characteristic of a black swan event is basically it's unpredictability, and it's basically incapability for the observer to assess the impacts of these shocks into the economy. So if we have if you observe a business cycle, the business cycle basically is subject to waves of upward and downward, and this basically results in a collection of data, which is basically very useful for any economic scenario to do some forecast. But the fact that the black swan events happen so rarely and in an unpredictable way, this complicates the understanding of the feedback loop that these events in the economy.
Paolo,
no one did expect that these events happening.
It did. It's been Paolo. It's been, these events have been forecast by many people for years, and I won't name people because we can all know. Well, when you come back to supply chain, my question is, we all knew this was going to happen, or anybody who manages their business for the future knows that these events are likely to happen. We know, whether you call them black swan or whatever, we know these type of events are going to happen. So the question is, why weren't the supply chains resilient for this? I think that's the important part. Geri, from a fashion sort of supply chain world, were they, I mean, they've been massively affected by this, so significant, because obviously clothing shops are closed. I mean, online's doing okay, but it doesn't fulfill the loss from the physical stores, which now are starting to open globally. But do you think there was any understanding within the clothing supply chains around this?
Yeah, like you said, the fashion industry is heavily impacted. So I think what we're starting to see now is a shift in behavior. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see a shift from globalization towards more localization.
Yeah.
Luxury industry, to some extent, was already prepared for this. Because most of the brands, they have factories both in Europe and Asia.
Yes.
So some of them were already prepared.
Yeah.
The nature of these pandemics that impacted almost every country in the world, it meant that many brands were unprepared and they're not agile enough to react to demand. But the biggest problem you're seeing in the fashion industry, at least, is that it's about demand forecasting and demand planning.
Yeah.
So because it's not just what happened during the pandemic, but it's what's going to happen after. So it's not clear the consumer reaction.
Yeah.
And considering that in fashion industry we have cycles, that means that the items get designed today and they will be sold to the consumer 6 months or even 12 months from now.
Yeah.
It means that the predictions were done during a time when they didn't expect there's going to be a global recession or depression. So we were starting to see kind of like big confusion between different brands, and they have two options how to react to this. So it's either they're going to start producing less and use the items that they have designed in the past. But the problem with fashion items, it's not like wine. The item itself, the clothes itself, they don't get better with age. They actually the opposite. They get worse. So it's leading to a huge shock to the companies. And the problem with this is going to lead to massive discounting, and which is a much bigger issue for the luxury industry in particular.
Is that the short-term discounting? So one of the, the high streets are coming back online, so to speak, and opening now. They may do some discounting. I know people have said they shouldn't, but they no doubt will because they need the cash to come in. Is next season and in 6 months' time, say when we're a bit more stable in the new world, do you think it will still be the same type of world? Are we still going to do these seasons every 6, 12 months, etc.? Is that looking likely?
Yeah, I think fashion industry is going to look very different after the crisis. That's my personal opinion, not MonoChain's opinion. It's going to look very different because I think to adjust towards consumer behaviors. The biggest issue with doing heavily discounted items right now, it is that it's all about customer expectations.
Yeah.
And if consumers get used to buying an item much cheaper, they will expect the pricing to change in the future. So it's a big dilemma that fashion brand CEOs have right now.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, what we're seeing is that during COVID-19 crisis, all the resale marketplaces almost like doubled in revenue, which is very interesting to see. And
people were selling their sort of current clothing at a higher rate, and I assume they were purchasing at a higher rate then. So more people were buying second-hand or pre-loved clothing.
Yeah, and we saw that from the different conversation we had. Also, this is public information. The conversion rate have increased massively. So people.
That's good for the environment, isn't it, as well, and climate-wise?
Yeah,
that's significantly better because. So what that's suggesting is the clothes are not being thrown in the bin, and they're actually being recycled. Somebody else is going to use them for a period of time.
Yeah, which it means like that e-commerce is a tidal wave, and it's happening much quicker than brands we are anticipating. So I think this crisis have accelerated digitalization and new trends by at least 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
That's like a personal belief, and we starting to see that. The problem with the high growth of resale, it means that resale is getting more market share, which means that it's not something that brands already predicted, which is going to lead to a bigger issue to the excess inventory. It's already being produced. So it's a bit fashion industry when it comes to the excess inventory or whatever it's been planned. It's going to have like a massive impact. So by December, it's either they're going to be less inventory that's required, or it's going to be a big excess inventory. Yeah. So it's fashion industry is having a huge shock. We are expecting that many brands, many like retailers will go bankrupt during this crisis. They'll not be able to handle. Yeah. So it's the whole industry. It's going through a radical shift. But for the future, we expect they're going to be more localization and less globalization. Just so in that way, they'll be more agile to respond to
I'm conscious that Paolo needs to go. Thank you, Paolo. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Cheers.
I appreciate that we are in disagreement on the black swan, but
we can talk in 2 weeks.
I hope you understand that this crisis, no one predicted where and when this could have been taking place. So it basically shocked us and took us unprepared, and no one really knew how to answer to this. And and you can listen to the first epidemiologist and virologist comment that no one knew if it was a flu or something more serious than flu.
Yeah.
And
no. Thank you, Paolo. We'll speak in a couple of weeks. Nikhil, on automation and AI and stuff. So one of the things, and Paolo just said it then, you know, nobody predicted this and stuff. Now, it was predicted that something would happen at some stage, somewhere, somehow. Right, so we've got amazing technology, AI and machine learning. Although at the moment I have a Google device which is not very good at any music that I request from it, so I'm not convinced it's that good. Anyway, if you think about the impact of this and forecasting for economic or supply chains especially, what is there? Can AI and ML and other technologies not help us with this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it can, right? And the three biggest technologies that are supposed to be helping with creating, you know, a modern supply chain is AI, DLT, and IoT, right? And actually, there was some work we did in the supply chain report we wrote with the RBC previously, where we were looking at, you know, what is the future of this, and actually it's transforming a supply chain into a digital supply network. So already there's kind of stuff that the leaders within the supply chain world are doing in order to incorporate all these technologies in. And really where it helps is in kind of four different areas. One is better communications, right? So you can see throughout, you can talk to all the partners within the supply chain in a much better way. The second is, you know, having diversification. And diversification you can get actually through having a good procurement processes in place. And actually these technologies can help speed up the procurement time tremendously. I mean, a lot of organizations to procure anything can take ages, right? So like if people are talking about how do you make a supply chain more resilient in terms of getting different suppliers, well, people just don't consider that because it's just hard to procure anybody. The other, I mean, Najib talked about a bit scenario planning. I mean, specifically scenario planning and using, you know, we touched upon Monte Carlo simulations or other artificial intelligence models can help to understand what the weaknesses are throughout the supply chain. But again, you know, that belies on the fact that you've used new technology like DLT to be able to map it out properly. If you haven't, and you know, you're not going to be your scenario planning is not going to be effective. And kind of the last one is kind of contractual obligations and making sure that, you know, within the contracts themselves, there's that these kind of factors are built in. And a lot of it wasn't, right? I mean, because people just didn't predict these kind of things. But if you have, you know, you're utilizing DLT, you want to put in smart contracts and so forth, there's more room to understand exactly where you stand right now as a result of impacting.
I can give you a very good example of that actually, what that particular, and that was one of the things I was going to just add to Antony. Apologies for cutting over you, Nikhil, there for a second, but just as one example from my own time working in some parts of the world, getting those SLAs in place and commitment to enable forecasting. And I know that Paolo's disappeared, but he spoke about that as well. We were asking for 6 months lead time simply because we knew that it would be a struggle to get information from our intermediaries to understand what the demands were going to be. That obviously impacted us upstream. You know, always problems with drug shortages, whether it was vaccine production or small molecules, whatever it was. And the challenge was that we very rarely got that lead time of 6 months. We could never hold anybody's feet to the fire. And this is where I see smart contracting really helping, making it automated. And if you can get those contracts in, a commitment to making sure that that data gets to us back on time automatically, we can then do all of the planning activities, be it simulations, be it just immediate operational forecasting, so we know what we need to do tomorrow or a week from now or 2 weeks from now.
That's interesting.
Sorry, go on.
It's interesting because when I look back to my days in electrical retailing and, you know, 10 years ago, and I was commercial finance and looking after the forecasting for the group, and it was done on spreadsheets. We basically, I think we might sell some more of these next year. You know, and you bring in AI and forecasting, but the difference is, and I think, you know, both Nikhil and Najib picked up, is we're not using the technology is there, but the data and the information flows are where it's struggling. So it's not using the right information, timely information, correct information. So you're forecasting basically on rubbish, you're going to get a rubbish result. If you forecast on good information and, you know, timely information, then you're going to get a good result. So I think, conscious of time-wise, I think maybe next week we'll talk about this, next 2 weeks even, we'll talk about this a bit more, because I think there's definitely something around forecasting, machine learning, AI, DLT, IoT, everything that Nikhil said, all those 3-letter acronyms and the 2-letter ones. And let's talk next week, next session, on how to use those more and how we can actually use this to forecast better. Because even, you know, Geri said within the fashion world, you know, they've got to forecast 12, 18 months, 2 years in advance. I mean, we don't even know what the world is like in, you know, next week. You know, we're all based in the UK. We've no idea what happens next week. We've got an announcement on Sunday, so happy days. But, you know, we don't know next week, never mind the future. So let's think about that for the next session. But thank you everyone for your time, and we'll leave a link on the video to the report that Nikhil mentioned. So that was a supply chain report that the RBC did just last year. So some really useful information. You can download that for free at the link that's on the screen. Anyway, thank you for your time, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks everyone.